welcome you to this evening's program on getting involved in town government. My name is Laura Dickey, and I currently serve as the League spokesperson. We last held a forum on this topic about 6 years ago, and we're very excited to talk about it again and also expand the focus to a wider focus on all the ways that you can get involved in the town. This event is being broadcast live by WestfordCAT on Wednesday, January 29th. It is also being taped for future rebroadcasting and viewing online. Just wanted to tell you a few words about the League. The League of Women Voters encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League is a nonpartisan political organization of women and men and does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. We always welcome new members, and membership forms are on the table outside, along with other information about the League. We have many programs upcoming in the next few months celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. Our website is lwv.westford.org, and it's got all the details there. I would now like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Diane Wood.
Thank you, Laura. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody here and at home. The intent of tonight's event is to share with everybody and explore the different ways to get involved in local government. So we can go from one end to another. We could go from simple being an election worker for one afternoon or one evening to the other more complicated purpose of running for local office. So we want to talk about how we all can get involved, and you can have the opportunity to hear from some of our elected officials on their stories. And the second part of this night will include board members and committee members who are here, and I think we have about 14 or 15 of them, and they have badges, so you can speak to those board members and ask questions about what their board does, what it means to be on their committee, and whether or not they have any openings, which I'm sure that they will share. I know in particular Water Commissioner, I'll give a shout out to Chauncey. I know in particular the Water Commissioner and Marilyn Frank for openings too. So people will share with you what their committees are like, how much time is involved. So two parts, we'll have a panel with our elected officials here, and then we'll cut and we'll have Jody talk, and we'll also have Patty Doobie talk about the election workers, and then we'll have a mingle section of where you can talk to the boards. There may be in the room more board people than there are audience, but everybody at home will have an opportunity to see who's here and to pick up the phone, send an email off, and get engaged, because there are all different ways to do it. Okay? So before I start, if you shut off your phones, that would be helpful, at least the ringer. That would be good. And outside on the table, there's literature. And we have How Westford Works. We have How to Run for Local Office, which is a little dated. However, there's some good tips and ideas in that. And as Laura said, we put that together probably 5 years ago now, I think. And we have league membership forms. There's also a 3-page committee description with the representatives who are in attendance in the room. So you'll get to see who's actually in the room by committee, by name. So before we kick off, any questions? I think we're good. With that, I'm going to turn to our panel. So I'd like to welcome our panel tonight. We have Elizabeth Almeida, we have Ming-Quen Chen, and we have Alicia Curtin Mallon, to say the whole thing, who are going to speak to you about their experiences in running for office. Okay? So we've got things timed. This is almost like candidates night, as some of you may know, all the excitement. So the first question is timed, and it's going to be for 2 minutes each. So I'll start with Elizabeth and ask, what inspired you to run? Why did you run? What inspired you to run for office?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us here this evening, and it's really exciting to see so many folks interested in this topic, perhaps thinking about running yourself or supporting someone who would like to run. My involvement in town government began about 7 or 8 years ago now. I was running a farm, and the Westford's Agricultural Commission hadn't met in about 7 years, and the select board gave Jody Ross the goal to activate the Ag Commission, so she got us together finally, I think in May of that year, around May 15th, and then I think on May 20th she said, and your committee's presenting at the town strategic planning retreat in 3 weeks. So we, under pressure, you pull together and get things done. So we thought this is a great opportunity to ask the town what they want from the Agriculture Commission, since we really didn't know what we were going to work on. So we did a little dot voting thing, and community garden came to the top. We started that the next year, and then 2 years later, we more than doubled the size of the community garden, and we have about 150 families that currently garden with us. So that was my first experience with town government, and then honestly, it was after Donald Trump was elected, and I was unhappy about that, and I thought, if the solution...
He inspired you.
He inspired me. I thought, if the solution is more women in office, and it starts with local office, then what excuse do I have to not put myself out there and run? And when I mentioned it to my husband, he just said, well, of course. I was expecting some pushback or, you know, something like that. So I think I called Jody pretty quickly then, and one of the first meetings or calls I had was with Marilyn, who was fabulous, of course, and very supportive, and told me I could do it, that I, you know, had what it took and had the skills, and that, you know, with the right information and support, that I could, you know, run a good campaign. So.
Excellent, thank you. Ming Kwan.
Thanks, Diane.
Yeah.
So I was actually the principal of the Chinese school. It's called Chanford's Chinese School, but most of the kids are actually from Westford. We cannot find a place in Westford, so we found a place in Chanford. So I probably spend like half of my time in China now, half of my time in the United States. So it's half and half now. When I first came here, right? So I was actually as a teaching assistant at a university nearby, and then I was actually grading the papers for students, and then I was a little bit horrified by some of the students. I say they're not really qualified to actually go to college, especially like they lack very basic understanding of math and physics. So which I say America, actually I came here to study at that time, right? Say America has all the money, has spent all this money on education. Why is that not working? Then I finally actually settled down, and then my daughter started school here. I look into how the kids are being taught, and then some of the things I think is really good, because I can clearly see the difference between my daughter and then the clone of my daughter if she was in China, and then the kids in America are more. They have better skills in presentation. They are more confident, which sounds a little bit funny because the kids in China, they have, I'll say that they have more solid foundation in basic skills, but they're more moderate, so they don't brag too much. But one thing I clearly can say is that even starting from elementary school, we're not really doing a good job in actually teaching kids to think step by step, logically, especially in the math curriculum. So I have enough experience both over there and here, so I say maybe I can contribute. And a lot of the parents came here. We share the same experience, and we shared almost the same concern. Is that we're spending all this money? Why don't we get the best results out of the education system?
Thank you. Alicia, what inspired you?
Thank you again to the League. I think if 4 years ago, if you had asked me if I would be sitting here, I would have laughed at you. But looking back, I have what I consider to be a pretty organic path to the school committee. So I have 2 kids in the district. I have, excuse me, sorry about that. I have a 7th grader and I have a 4th grader. And I started out in the schools with the PTOs. I was the cookies crew mom. I ran book sales. I did volunteering in the building. And from there, I moved to the school advisory council, which was sort of the next logical step. And I was on the school advisory council for a few years. And then the override came up. And the district reached out to the principals and said, do you know of anyone you think would be good, willing to serve on this committee? And one of my children's principals suggested me. And then at the same time, there were several seats opening on the school committee. So looking back, it was a very organic process to go from volunteering in my kids' schools to the school advisory councils to the override to running. I'm still stunned that I'm here. But I think what the driving factor for me is always my kids. I'm doing this for my kids, and one of the other groups that I'm a part of in town is the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, the CPAC. And it's a smaller group of parents, but they're a very dedicated group of parents, and they've been, fighting an uphill battle for years to be represented and to have their own personal experiences taken into account when we're talking about policy and budget and handbooks and regulations and all of those things. So for me, I looked at the school committee and I thought, this is an underrepresented voice. If we're talking about equity, if we're talking about diversity, if we're talking about making sure everyone has a seat at the table, this is a voice that isn't being heard. So that was my next logical step, was I felt like I could move into the school committee from the CPAC and be a voice for those parents.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for all of that. Okay, we'll now go into our second question, and you have 4 to 5 minutes on this one. So I'll start with Elizabeth. At the beginning of your campaign, you learned about traditional ways of fundraising and working on a campaign, but you decided to try a different path. So can you talk about the difference between the traditional running a campaign, the different path that you chose, and why you chose it?
Sure. So one of my favorite stories from the beginning of my campaign is when I decided to run, I was told that you have to have a fundraiser, it's going to take thousands of dollars to run a local campaign, and that everybody has their fundraiser at Bamboo on a Monday night. And I thought, I don't know that I've ever been to Bamboo, and I certainly don't think my friends are going to get babysitters, pay a babysitter so they can come to Bamboo on a Monday night so they can donate money to my campaign. So I thought, if I'm going to get my friends to join me on this and to support me, I have to do something where they can be engaged. So I had my campaign kickoff at St. Mark's. We rented the hall for a Sunday afternoon and had an ice cream social. And we had the kids in the corner making signs for me, and we had, it's just, and I think part of it comes from my Midwestern roots where ice cream socials are a thing, especially a political thing, and it's like, who wouldn't come out for an ice cream party? And that was really, as I campaigned, I really tried to include families, because I thought if I'm, I have young children, and if I'm going to represent families, we can't make politics just about who can make it to the Bamboo on a Monday night, who can afford a babysitter and get to the Bamboo to join us. So really throughout my campaign, I tried to be mindful of including, setting things up so my friends could bring their whole family. And then at that kickoff party, honestly, it was the first time I'd ever been to a campaign kickoff. So I didn't quite know how it was supposed to go, and I asked everyone there, who's ever been to a campaign kickoff before, and probably only half the room had. So it was exciting to see that more folks were getting engaged, and people who maybe never thought they would support a political campaign were willing to come out and hear me and support me and see how they could make a difference in our local politics.
Thank you. Anything else to add about how different?
No, I think that was, how I started was the, I didn't use all my time, did I? Maybe I'll take it later, because I have about 10 things to say for the last question.
Okay, good. That's good. Ming-Kwan, so you are one of the few, if not only, officials that represent not only a minority, overlapping both the Asian population and the immigrant population in town. Can you talk a little bit about that and the importance of diversity in the community?
Yes, so clearly from this audience, I'm probably the only one or two people, like, from a different country, or from like some place you have to fly like 13 hours away to actually visit your parents, plus another like 5 hours train ride, and then plus another like 3 hours bus. So definitely it's a very different life experience, right? The place I grew up in central China, which unfortunately now it's the epicenter of the coronavirus. So basically, my entire family, all the staff, they are staying indoors to actually to keep safe. And that's where I came from. And then when we move in town, certainly there is a big Asian population in town, but the Asian population normally the first generation they don't really have a foundation in this country. They have to actually both parents work to actually to supply the family. Finally, they are able to actually buy a house, trying to actually educate and then have settle down, have a good family. So really, they don't have time for anything else. I always think that you need to actually have a voice on the table to actually to show your life experience, and then sometimes it's just a different way of thinking or different way of working on things. I think this country actually provide a lot of good opportunities for us, and then it's our way to actually contribute back. The other thing which really I think what I can bring to the table is that I know Westford has a lot of like local roots, a lot of committees that are actually local roots. I don't have any roots here. So when I make decisions, or when I actually get into places, I got to know everybody new, right? And that also means that when I make decisions, I don't have to actually deal with some very complex human connections or other stuff. So I can actually deal with things more from not think about the other stuff, but just actually based on the facts. So that's the other thing, which is good and bad, right? Because the bad thing is that I don't really know a lot of people in town, but the good thing is that I don't know a lot of people in town. So also is that, for example, there are like different ways of thinking, especially I talk about math in elementary school, which is like in here it's like general education. It's like one teacher teaches everything in elementary school, but that's very different in other countries, because in other countries, even in elementary school, they have dedicated math teachers, because it's very hard for like one teacher, even in the elementary school level, to actually to know everything and then teach every single subject. So that's one of the things which I found really interesting. I can actually give like a million other examples, but my life experience and then where I see the good, bad of both education systems, which I sometimes I can actually say, hey, is this possible? Is it? So.
Thank you. Thank you. Alicia, you've had a very interesting journey in your, I'll put it that way, in your school committee experience. So talk to us about the different roles you've played and the duration and what has changed from when you first took over the one-year position to now, and talk a little about that.
So interesting, I think, is it's a great word. So for those that don't know, the first year that I ran, there were 2 seats available and there were 3 of us who were running. However, that same year, Tom Clay was running for the select board, so we knew there was a possibility that there would be another seat open. And I ran in what we still call the friendliest school committee race this town has ever seen. And I remember stunning people when they would say to me, if it's not you, what do you think of the other candidates? And I would tell them, my kids are in good hands whether I'm on that board or not. Because I felt like the 3 of us were so similar and the 3 of us were so dedicated to what it was we wanted to get out of the board, my kids were gonna be fine. I was okay not being on the board. A little bit okay not being on the board. So then Tom Clay got elected and we had an opening. And when that happens, when there's an opening on the school committee and the Board of Selectmen, now the Select Board, get together and you apply to them, and then they vote someone to fill in by 1-year increments. So there were 2 years left on Tom's seat. And that first year, I had I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was nowhere near unanimous from the 7 school committee members and the 7 school committee members and the 5 select board members. But then that year that I was appointed for was honestly, it was a great opportunity, because I spent that year going to MASC workshops. I spent that year researching policy. I spent that year putting the time in on subcommittees, doing the work. And by the time I came to the next year, we had 4 people running for what was essentially 3 seats, plus Tom's extra year. And I did not make it off the ballot that time either, but there was Tom's extra year. And by the time we got to the select board school committee joint voting, I had increased and only 1 person did not vote for me. And I felt like, well, that gave me a lot of encouragement, because I felt like I'm proving myself. Every year I'm doing more and more, and I'm proving myself. I'm showing myself to be someone who's not afraid of the hard work, someone who's going to be informed and educated and dig in and do the work. So then this past year there was no more Tom Clay seat, because that's what we called it for so long, was the Tom Clay seat. And this past year there were 3 of us who ran, and I was far more successful this year, which I am very much appreciative of. And I feel like, though it was a very non-traditional path, we'll say, it did give me a lot of time to do the work, to get my feet underneath me, to prove to the people in town that I was willing to dig in and do the hard work, but that I was also willing to do the research, to sit in on the policy meetings, to sit in on as many budget meetings as I possibly could. That I wasn't just there for one reason, that I was there for all of Westford's children. And I think, though it was very non-traditional, I wouldn't have it any other way, because now I'm here and I have 2.5 years under my belt and 2 more years left to go.
As you were talking, all I could think of was a school committee internship.
Yeah. Sort of. It was sort of like school committee light, like 1 year at a time in tiny bite pieces.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, final question here. And you can make up your time, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
So, we're going to wrap up by talking for a few minutes. In hindsight, we'll talk about lessons learned. What advice can you give to people watching and to people in the room? If they would run to office, what would you change? What would you do differently? Anything you want to talk about running for them? Elizabeth.
Great. So I did make a list here of things I wanted to share about this topic. And as I look around the room, the first piece of advice I have for folks is to first, for your involvement in town government, to follow your passion. And I'm looking at folks in the room who I know have a lot of passion in particular areas and also professional expertise, and you're generously giving that to the community. So if you would like to get more involved, you're not quite sure about running, there's so many committees that either, a special interest of yours or what you do professionally, so many ways to volunteer and contribute to the town and to learn more about how the town works through that avenue. And then my second piece of advice, if you do pull papers and start to run, is to seek to understand and to spend as much time as possible talking to as many people in town as possible, especially other elected or board members and town employees. And during my campaign, one of the pieces of advice I had was to go meet with the department heads. So I called the chief of police, I called the fire chief, I went to Parks and Rec, I made my way around the whole town, trying to meet all the department heads. And it really gave me an understanding of what they face in their day-to-day work and what their needs are. And that way, when I got to the table, I had a more balanced view. I'd already heard from, one department head, and I knew what their needs might be, but then I knew I couldn't just say, oh yeah, I'll definitely support everything you're asking for, because at the same time I had already heard from another department head, and I started to understand the different competing interests in town. And really, what I have found is that it's true that you have to end up with everybody a little unhappy with you, because if that's, if you're not quite meeting everybody's needs, then you're probably doing your best to, meet, satisfy most people 90% of the way instead of a few people 100% of the way. But seeking to understand both the town employees, the board members who knew the current issues and could tell you the history. You sometimes see an issue being discussed, but you don't know that this has been going on for 5 or 10 years, and who the players are, and who's in the room and what they're saying and why they're saying what they're saying and why people might be making the faces they're making when they say it. So, and then also to talk to as many residents as possible, just to get their perspective and to appreciate, you know, where they're coming from, what's important to them, what they would like to see from their local government. So really, you know, seek to understand and talk to everyone. And then my third piece of advice is to work hard, because once you decide to run for office, you realize it's a lot of work, and you commit yourself. You know, our election season is roughly January to May, and so for that period of time, you know, my husband knew I was all in on this, and so that meant being out a couple nights a week and getting to as many committee meetings as possible, partly to meet folks, but also to understand, you know, what they're discussing and what the issues are. So, you know, attending school committee meetings, select board meetings, the finance committee meetings that are going on right now, and then as many other meetings as you can. And then, you know, there's a lot of work in terms of, you know, just staying organized and staying on track, you know, having a schedule and checking off the to-do list to make sure that you're reaching out to people and staying organized. My fourth piece of advice is to start early. So I thought about it for a long time before I actually jumped in, and then when I jumped in, I realized maybe I was a little late. But whatever, you just start where you start, and you know, put yourself all in and go for it. But really, the earlier you start, the more time you have to get everything lined up and organized. And then my fifth and final piece of advice is, if you decide to run for office, do whatever it takes to get an hour with Marilyn Frank. And she will lay it out for you in about a half an hour. She'll lay out for you step by step what you need to get done and what the timeline's going to be. And you know, if you follow what Marilyn tells you to do, you have a high likelihood of running a successful campaign. I say that both joking and seriously, because there are folks in town who really know what it takes to run a successful campaign. And I'm also looking over there at Bob Price, who generously gave me a few hours at the library very early in my campaign and explained to me everything going on at the library, but then just everything, you know, all the information that the League of Women Voters puts out. He, you know, shared all that with me and helped me make my list of what I needed to do and who I needed to talk to, and helped me with those introductions. So I spent, you know, I'm fairly new to town. We've only been here about 8.5 years, and, you know, still a blow-in, I guess. You know, and so I think there's a temptation to be, you know, to represent the new, young faces in Westford, but I found it equally important to spend time with my peers and families that I knew through the kids', you know, school activities, but also to spend time with the people who have lived here for 30, 40, 50 years, and who have been in town, and who have made this such a wonderful place. You know, there have been decisions that have been made over the past several decades that have brought us to this point of having so much open space that's been preserved, and that we can live in a town with over 2,000 acres of preserved land. Like, that's really inspiring. And, you know, the committee that decided to buy East Boston Camps, that had the foresight to do that, and they weren't intimidated by that big price tag, and said, you know, we can pull together, make a plan, and we'll be committed to this for the to paying it off for the next couple of decades, but it's worth doing. So during my campaign, I tried to spend time with the folks who have been responsible for some of those big decisions in town, and hoping to absorb some of their wisdom so that I could help, you know, continue the town on that path.
Thank you.
I think Elizabeth made really, really great points, and then I second that, and then especially actually calling Mary Frank.
Marilyn's going to be really busy now. We should have Marilyn up here next. Why don't we just have Marilyn do, like, she can teach everybody at once how to run a campaign.
Yeah, definitely, because Marilyn gave me a lot of, like, walk me through the process for the stuff. It's really, like, it's very helpful, because otherwise, someone who has never run election before or have never voted before. Oh, I voted before. I voted before because I became a citizen in late 2015. So yeah, definitely I voted before. So there are a lot of things to learn. Yeah, you already said, call Marilyn Frank. So definitely we need to put this as number one. Start early, definitely start early. When I started, I already bought ticket actually that year to visit my parents in China for the February vacation. So when I put the papers, I only have one weekend actually to get people to sign my papers before I hop on a plane. So basically, I have to actually send out a mass like spam or whatever, and say, hey, I'm going to be a parabride. Please come and sign my papers. So I did that, and then I have enough papers, and then I submit it to town clerk, and then on Friday I hop on a plane going to China. And then when I came back, it's already like late February. And then I don't have any infrastructure, I have nothing set up. So call Marilyn Frank. and also is like to talk to as many town board members, talk to as many people in town. Definitely that's important because you want to actually learn from the wisdom about people who have been in town for many years or who know about the town, how the town operates. So that's very important to actually to really talk to them. I think you have also raised a lot of good points. You definitely have to actually put your dedication into it because if you are running for office, you're running for office because you believe in something. You don't do it because you want fame or you want anything else. Okay, you do it because you really think you can actually help. And then the other thing really is you have to actually got to put yourself out there, talk to people, talk to residents, knock on door. When I was actually running, I have been to many areas or streets of Westford which I have never been to because for me, normally it's like going to work, go back home, library, school, that's it. I have no idea there are so many areas of Westford which I have never been to. There are so many people living in different places. The other thing which is that you're always going to have limited resources. So be very strategic. What I did, and then what my team did, basically that we went to Patty's office. We downloaded the voter information for the last few years, and then we ran some data analysis. We weighted the voter based on their past voter behavior, and then because there are like 17,000 voters in town, and then there are probably like 2,000 people are going to come out to vote. For the town election, it's really impossible to actually target all the voters. You don't have the resources, you don't have the money. I know some people actually send out postcards or stuff or like mailings, but those are very expensive. For most of the people, it's not actually, it's going to cost a lot of money to do that. So we actually do some analysis and weighted the voter behavior, and then basically selected probably like 3,000 voters or 4,000 voters to target. That's how then we actually divide and conquer the 4,000 voters into like different areas, and then we have a team of like people to knock on the doors to actually to explain why are we running and what we can bring to the table. And then most of the time, when you show up, people will listen. Because if you don't show up, they don't even know you exist. I think especially in town election, show up is the most important thing.
Excellent. Thank you. Alicia.
So I agree with everything Elizabeth said, and you're second. I feel like I should, call the vote here. But I have to say, support structure. I think what you're hearing from everyone sitting at this table is you need a support structure. And you need to start by figuring out what it is that will keep you invested. Some of the boards meet infrequently. Some of us meet a lot more frequently. If you don't find something that's going to keep you invested, you're not going to stick with it, and you're going to burn out fast. My advice would be to take a look at some of the smaller boards and find something that you feel can be your path. I know there's fantastic projects coming up in town. Our library is getting ready to apply for a renovation grant. And that sounds absolutely fascinating to me. I know that we have, huge things coming up on other boards as well. I know that if you're a finance person, the FinCom is always looking for more people. If you're a nature person, Healthy Westford and the Conservation Commission are always looking for more people. I know that if you're into sort of green topics and conservation, and the Energy Commission is always looking for people. So I think you need to look first at what's out there and find what will keep you the most invested, and then do your homework. You need to reach out to the boards. You need to reach out to members of the town. Canvassing. I apologize again to everyone whose dogs I freaked out when we were canvassing and I rang the bell. You need to reach out and be as informed as possible before you serve on a board. I would also say support structure is very necessary too, because after 2 years of running, 2 years in a row, I had a friend sit me down and say, "You are so invested in doing this job, you can't also apply to do this job at the same time by yourself," because I was trying to do it all myself, and it was not possible. Everything they've said about, meeting with people and canvassing, and you need a support structure. Even if it's just a friend that you can send a crazy meme to, you need a support structure. And I had that. And I think that made my 3rd year a lot easier. And then I would say, they're very correct in saying that no one does this to get rich, no one does this to get famous. We're all here because we believe in something. We're all here because we found something that we were passionate about. And if you can keep that in mind, if you can make decisions coming from a place of, I am as informed as I possibly can, and I'm making the best decisions possible for Westford, then I feel like you can't go wrong.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, questions? We have a few minutes for audience questions for any of the 3 panelists. Even plant questions.
That's a planted question from Chrissy.
It's not. Christy.
Hi, Christy Bates. My question is a 2-part question. I'm wondering, once you started in your position, what did you find out was something that you enjoyed that you didn't expect that you would enjoy, being on the select board and school committee? And also, what did you find to be a challenge that you didn't expect?
Did everybody hear, Christy?
No. Sorry. I asked once they started the position, what did they find that they really enjoyed that they didn't expect that they would enjoy? And then what did they find that they thought was a challenge?
Elizabeth.
I have a funny answer for what I've enjoyed. And my 3rd year on the board, my fellow board members had encouraged me to be the chair of the board, and I said, no, I don't want to do that. And they twisted my arm and persuaded me I should, and I found out I actually do enjoy running the meetings. I get control over the agenda, and I get to make sure that the meeting moves along, and I can put thought into how it should go so that we make sure all the voices are heard in a respectful way, but also keep the meeting moving so that we can all get home, before it gets too late, because I personally don't think we make great decisions when it gets past 9:30 or 10 at night. And so if I can, I like to keep the meeting moving and a plan to wrap up by 9:30 or so that we're all there, with our best brains when we're making important decisions for the town. And I've, come to appreciate that, that's a significant role on a committee, is to have it chaired in a way that people are heard and that it moves along. And then I would say one of the challenges is you can attend, I attended the select board meetings from January to May before my election. And you learn a lot about what's going on, but then there are a lot of other responsibilities that you don't realize are within the board's purview that come up at random times. And I think one of them was dog hearings. I had no idea that the select board had jurisdiction over dangerous dogs in town, so that was quite a surprise to me the first time we had a dangerous dog and we had to have those hearings, and they're quite emotional and all of that. So yeah, one of the challenges is the things that you don't anticipate. And even with, on the select board, we have our list of things that we oversee, but there's a lot more that just comes up. Interesting projects come up, opportunities come up for the community, and so the town manager brings those to our board, and we do our best to put our creative minds together and figure out if it's an opportunity or a solution to a problem. So in that way, it's not just, checking off the boxes every week of the tasks we have to get done. It's, really trying to think creatively and strategically and what's in the best long-term interest of the community. And then I would say one of the other challenges on the select board is just being mindful that you're caring for the whole community, and that, there are a lot of interests and a lot of voices that come to your board, and you always have to be able to keep that high-level perspective of trying to balance everyone's needs. And it goes with finances, but it also goes with other town resources and staff resources. So just being able to always keep that, always be mindful of that, and to make your decisions with everyone in mind.
Thank you. And Quan.
If I say we enjoy the 6-hour meeting for 3 times a week, are you guys gonna kill me? No, I don't enjoy that. No, what I really enjoy is that when we have actually student visitors, the students actually now are very open, they're very candid, and then you can really see the product of our school system. I'm really proud of the students, how they actually present themselves, how they actually compose, how they think about things. So really that's very enjoyable. And then also we got like all those letters from the little ones, right? Goes for better tomorrow. Well, invite us for those events in various places. It's really very enjoyable, although like sometimes you have to actually go to meetings for 6 hours for like 3 times a week. But but it's worth it when you actually see that the kids from the school system, they are able to actually get on to college or to other venues to be able to actually excel themselves. There are a lot of things not expected. So when I actually got on the board, we have 2 tough budget years, last year and this year. So it's very difficult. Every decision which we're going to make is going to actually impact some students or impact some personnel. So that's very difficult. So we have to deal with that. That's something which before I got into the committee, I never actually think about that too much.
Yeah.
But getting onto the committee and then have to actually really to say what we can do with fiscally responsibly, and then within the town's budget constraint. So it can be really difficult, but we'll get through that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Alicia.
I have to say I agree wholeheartedly. I knew going into school committee that I was going to love policy, researching, writing things. That's my wheelhouse. The time commitment and what Ming-Chung was talking about as far as budget decisions and having to weigh the logical versus the humans that are standing in front of you. And as a school committee, every decision we make affects the adults, the staff, and the almost 5,000 kids we have in this district. And that can be a tough balance. And I think there is, a prime example of what everyone has said, where you need to inform yourself. You need to understand what the commitment is. I think I was a little surprised by the time commitment as well. But again, that's you get out of a committee what you put into it. Because you can be on school committee and you can show up every 2 weeks and read your packet, and that's it. Or you can dig into budget meetings and you can serve on subcommittees. I serve on 2. You can go to workshops. That I think is one of the things I am most surprised that I really enjoy, because if I told you guys I was an introvert, you'd probably laugh at me, but I really am an introvert. I love going to workshops to talk to people about policy. I am stunned that I love doing that, but I do, because I like to hear what other districts are doing, because then I can bring the best practices back to our district. Yes, the time commitment has been more than I thought it would be in the beginning. And the budget is definitely difficult in the last couple of years, but there are things like the kids and being able to tour a building. I love when we go tour buildings and we talk to our administrators and they show us what one classroom looks like in Abbott versus another classroom, because then we go back and we talk about enrollment and we know that room 5 is completely different from room 23. And we can go into our buildings and ask our staff, what is it you need? And I think that has been an absolutely phenomenal experience. I understand more about the district from doing things like that than I think I ever would have if I had never run.
Excellent. Thank you.
Can I add to my answer?
Yes, of course.
One of the other things that I've really enjoyed is getting to know the town staff and and so many wonderful people in town. I feel like on the select board you really have a front seat to some of the finest people and events and things that happen here in the community. And when you get to know our town staff, you know, most of them work quietly. They don't get much recognition for what they do, but you realize that they're really dedicated. They're public servants, they're public employees for a reason, and that's because they enjoy serving the community and they bring tremendous expertise in their field and combine that with a passion to serve the community. And so you get to know these terrific people that work for us. And then seeing the success of so many efforts that improve the community. So, you know, for example, the fundraisers when someone in town is in need, and we get to see and recognize the folks that give so generously to support those in need. Or we see, you mentioned the Westford Girls for a Better Tomorrow, when you have, you know, a half dozen middle school girls that come to you because they're raising money for Habitat for Humanity, and they ask you to help get the word out about their fundraiser and their bake sale. You know, and you get to see that, you know, see everyone living their passion and seeing how they contribute to our community. It's really inspiring, and it's nice to be able to recognize those folks.
Excellent, excellent. Any more questions? No. With that, I'd like to thank you all for sharing, educating, telling your stories, and we'll have a round of applause for our panelists. And next we're going to hear from Jody Ross and Patty Doobie about Citizens Activity Forum and election workers. Yeah, you come up here. We'll shift.
Thank you.
Is that in case I forget my name?
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, you can kick off.
Do I
Yes,
start?
yes.
I think before I start, I just want to say that Westford is such a wonderful community. I've been here 11 and a half years now, and I just love this town. And sometimes we have difficulties, and we've been having some with the budget, but you know, we are just such a warm, wonderful community for all the reasons Elizabeth and some of the others you know, said. I never want us to lose sight of that. We may disagree on different issues, but it's a wonderful place to live and a wonderful place to work. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. So I'm talking about the Citizen Activity Forum, and we have roughly 80 committees in town. Whenever the selectmen want to form a new one, I'm always like, wait, but we've had more and so on. But if you're interested, and many of you are already on different groups, but we have what's called a Citizen Activity Forum, and you go to our website, which I think is up here, which is westfordma.gov, and you can, I don't know that I have control of this, but you can go to the residence section. I don't know if we're on the site, but
No,
okay.
that's just a
Okay, so
slide.
you would go to the residence section at the top, get involved, volunteering, and then the citizen activity form, which I think is what you're seeing here. And so on the citizen activity form, you fill out your personal data, and then you give a little narrative of why you're interested in volunteering, maybe some special interest or some experience that you've had. And then if you go down, there's all the committees and boards that you can volunteer for. If it's elected, you can't click on that. If it's elected, you go see Patty Doobie. But if it's appointed, then you can click all the boxes that are of interest to you. Some are appointed by the selectmen, some are appointed by me. But when you click on that and then you press submit, that goes to my office, not to me, but it goes to my project procurement specialist. And then what she does is she sends it out to the chairman or the entire committee of whatever you checked. So if they have openings, then they can get in touch with you. Many people that are interested will go attend some meetings and see if they really want to get involved in that committee. But and then they might interview them or whatever, and then make a recommendation to either me or the Board of Selectmen to appoint. So I think Alicia said that it was good to get involved in what you're interested in, and look at Elizabeth. You know, she volunteered for the Ag Commission, and she just got that going like gangbusters, and then ended up wanting to run for selectman. So a lot of people start out that way. They don't just start, you know, at an elected position. But I think unless you have any questions, and if you do, please contact us in the town manager's office. I'm on the web page. You can click on me. It comes right to me. You can call me. You can stop by my office. Always like to see you, but that's kind of the process of getting involved.
Thank you. I do want to give a shout out to Jody, because Jody got all the board members and committee people here tonight. So I do want to thank her.
I'm not sure I can accept
for
that.
her contribution that got many of you here tonight. So,
but I will say, I mean, it is the volunteers are fantastic, and I've gotten to know many very well over the years, and I thank you, Elizabeth, for recognizing the staff. We do leadership training whenever I can find money to do it, which isn't often, and when we give out what motivates you to work here, what's the most important thing to work here, 99.9% of the time they check to help people. That's why we do what we do. I just got goosebumps saying it. I mean, we are passionate about our jobs. We love helping you, and that's why we take our jobs, and that's why we stay here. And I have people, Ellen Rainville has been here, I believe, 48, 49 years now. She's my longest serving, but we have many that work in their 30s, and then we have some that retire and come back, like Marilyn. So, but anyway, I'll be quiet. I could talk for 20 more minutes.
we have
but I
time.
won't.
It's okay, you can if you want to.
No, you talk.
Well, I'm not much of a public speaker. I will say I do deal with all the people that come in to pull papers for positions. I'll say this. I know I'm supposed to talk about voter election workers, but let me just say this. I think those people are the most courageous people. I could never do that. There are many town clerks that are elected still in the Commonwealth, and I just think, no, you know, I couldn't do it. And I am glad for your wonderful comments. I like to help everybody that comes in, because I just think how I would feel doing that, and you just want to make sure they understand or know that they can call you and ask questions. And I really have a lot of respect for people that put themselves out there like that, and they volunteer their time. I think a lot of people in town think you're getting paid some massive salary and you're getting paid nothing, and and I just really respect that. So we'll go on to election workers. So we have a lot of elections this year in particular. I have 4 of them. Well, the town has 4 of them. I have election workers, probably a little over 100, who have said they would like to work. Many of them all work every election. Some can't. Some, you know, have specific ones they like to do. If my mother was here, she'd kill me because I'm moving my hands. She always says you can't do that. At the moment, I do have quite a few, but we have people in Florida, especially for this presidential election. I'm always looking for folks. I am really looking for people that we call closers. So maybe you can't devote your whole day to it, and it's a 7.5, 8-hour shift where it's in 2 shifts, starts at 6 in the morning. The ones in the afternoon may end at 10 at night if it's a very well-attended election. Closers come in at 8. They're fresh minds that can come in and count ballots that need to be counted. The machine didn't count them, write-ins, things like that. They help folks put things away. That's wonderful. That may take an hour to 2 hours of your time. You can volunteer. We will pay you, whichever. We have lots of people who just volunteer. They just want to do their civic duty. That's wonderful, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. But we certainly will pay you as well, and we thank you for it. I'd be happy to take any questions about anything about the town clerk's office. I'm here or not.
how many elections, why don't you tell the audience how many elections we have coming up this year?
We have 4 elections this year. The first one is going to be the presidential primary, which is March 3rd. That's where you will have 4 different ballots. In Massachusetts, we have 4 parties: the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Libertarian, and the Green Rainbow. So it's like 4 elections in one. That's why they call it a primary. So you're going to come in and you're going to select which ballot you want. However, if you are enrolled in a particular party, you're only going to get that ballot, that party's ballot. It should be well attended. Most presidential primaries always are. We are going to have early voting again, so that will be at the town hall February 24th through the 28th, the week right before the March 3rd. Should be a lot of fun. We don't have a ton of room in the town hall. It's very
But
close.
I love the early voting because we get so many people in the town hall, and that's really, it's fun. I
Yes.
mean, we
It's like the old days
have
with
to
so many people.
have the aisles so we can get through, but it is really neat to see everybody in the town hall. We really like that.
It's true. So the next election after that would be on May 5th. That's the town election, which is shaping up to be some contests, which make it a lot of fun. Last few years, we haven't had so many. They're probably my most favorite election because I know the people personally, and I've dealt with them, and it's personal, and I enjoy that. The next election would be the state primary, which is September 1st, and that will be for the state offices, things like, I'm going to say, I think Laurie Trahan's seat is running again, and Jim Arciero's seat will be up again, and, you know, the people who want to run against them. And then the final election this year would be November 3rd, which is the big one, the presidential election. So, for this year. And we have town meetings in there, don't forget those. So,
So lots of opportunity.
right.
Lots of opportunity.
Lots of opportunity.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? So lots of opportunities on both sides, citizen activity forum. If there aren't any questions from the audience, we'll thank our guests. We'll thank Jody and thank Patty and wrap it up.
Thank you.
So before we go to the next segment, there are committee descriptions out on the table for those boards and committees that are here, are present today. And on the chart, on the wall in red are those particular committees that have representatives. So lots and lots, I don't know if that's all 80, I don't think so, it's a sample. However, the ones in red are the ones that are identified and have representatives in the room. And obviously, those are the people that have little name tags.
I was just going to say, I also represent Community Preservation Committee.
Okay. So, understood. We'll work on that. So at this point, what we're going to do is Laura's going to wrap up for us, and then we'll talk about the meeting and greeting for mingling with each one of the committees.
Yeah, no, I wanted to thank Diane for moderating and for all the panelists for sharing their experiences. I found it fascinating. So thank you, and remember to check our website, lwv.westford.org, for our upcoming events. And yeah, now I think.
Right, so the plan was just to
Mingle.
spend a few minutes talking to the committee members, see if there's anything interested, if you have any questions about, as I said, what it entails. They've got name tags. If you do have, I'll say it now, if you do have if you're looking for openings and you are a committee rep that has openings, why don't you just raise your hand right now? Okay, so we have five or six. Okay, so hone in for those of you in the room that have questions or that are interested. Yes.
I just wanted to say something that I think people.
Why don't you come
listening
to
as
the
well.
come to the microphone? Say who you are.
Kate Hollister, I'm on the planning board. I'm not on this. I just want people to know, if you're interested, you should put in an application, even if they're already, the board is full, because you never know, an opening comes up, like Marilyn can talk about Conservation, they've had an opening for several months now, and if somebody had put in that they were interested maybe a year ago, somebody would remember it and say, hey, why don't we reach out to this person and see if that person is still interested in it. Or you might put in for a committee that you think, oh, it's full, and maybe there's a board member who's been on it for 100 years and they'd love to get off it, but they feel obligated to stay on it because nobody ever says, you know, I'd really like to try that. So don't be intimidated. Just get it out there that you are interested in it.
Thank you,
That's
Kate.
my comment.
The other thing, I think someone mentioned this, is that if you are interested, even before you fill out the form, attend some of those meetings, right? Spend an evening or two, attend them. See the people on, ask questions, and then you can make your own call. You can make the rounds out of all the boards and committees in town. And then you can make your own decision as to where your passion is, as Alicia was talking. So all different ways to get involved, from low end, a couple of hours, to election, to running for an elected position. So I think we'll allow you to mingle, talk to people. I thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for people who are watching, and I think it's a wrap. Thanks, everybody.